Howdy, howdy, Sue Devil here, and welcome to a future DLC and races speculation video. Now, this was spurred on by a comment. I love comments, and I appreciate every single one. So, if you've been around for a while, you know I like comments. If you're new to my channel, definitely love to hear from you, even if it's just to say hello. And the comment I got was from Vaughn Thomas. He was asking, "Hey Sue, what's your opinion on Gracie or Thankful, Gotrek, and Felix? Do you think we will see them in the game?" And it's made me think about the future DLC and some of the characters we may see. Now, as far as Thankful, I think we're definitely going to see Thankful. Gotrek and Felix, we may see them very, very late in after game 3. It might be in a special dwarf pack, but I thought I would go over sort of how I see Warhammer 2 DLC developing and game 3, and then some of the possibilities for the races. Now, this map is obviously very, very skewed in the actual game map. The old world is huge, and the Southlands are pretty small, but I think for game 2, we have 3 more DLC packs coming before we get to game 3, and then when we get to game 3, by all accounts, it's going to be very chaos centric, and we'll go over that. So the 3 DLCs I think we have coming in game 2 yet are, first of all, Estalia, Talea, and the Border Princes. Now, it's because they can fit into game 2. They're just in the map, and maybe you can just put Estalia, but they're pretty important, and they're in a very nice place. And I know it burns some people's britches that they are Empire troops, but I could see that being in game 2. They're well placed. They make for some very fun and interesting campaigns. They have awesome units, and we might see our first ogres, which will be a prelude to game 3, I think. Now, how they'll release that, I don't know, but there's probably going to be a reasonable amount of work to it, depending on the units that they bring in. But they can reuse a lot of models, of course, because they're humans, and it's time for a human DLC, I think. So I can definitely see Estalia, Talea, and Border Princes, however they put it, into game 2 as a DLC pack. And then the next DLC I definitely see happening in game 2 is a Lizardmen versus Skaven DLC. And the reason I think that is just simply because they don't have Regiments of Renown yet, and I think they're the only 2 races that don't. There's a lot of possibilities. I mean, Lizardmen and the Skaven are just, we're just in the tip of the iceberg. Skaven are everywhere in the old world, new world, and the only place they don't exist is in Ulthuan, because it's floating technically in the ocean. There's no underway. There's no way to get there for them, although they have been there. But I can see those 2 as being the next 2, Talea, Estalia, and the Border Princes, I can't remember, the Southern Kingdoms or whatever, and then a Lizardmen versus Skaven. And there's a lot of ways to do that, I think, and it will be interesting. And there's still a lot more units for the Skaven available, like a lot of interesting units too, like Rattling guns. Those are going to be fantastic. I think it'll be a great DLC pack for that. And the last DLC, I think, is going to be a pre-order pack. Just like we had Norska as a pre-order for game 2, Chaos as a pre-order for game 1, I think we are going to have Kislev as a pre-order pack for game 3. It just seems to be so obvious. There's a lot of people who love Kislev. They're very unique. They have amazing units, and they are going to, I think, be perfect because they can be involved in game 3. I think game 3 is going to, so we got Talea, Stalia, and the Border Princes down here. Very interesting gameplay, and they might do, who knows where they're going to put the Skaven Lizardmen pack, but I would imagine it being in Lustria. It might even be Sotek. I know Lore Master Sotek has some interesting ideas, and an interesting idea for a DLC pack, and it could end up being down in Lustria, and that would be quite interesting, I think. But Kislev are right up here, and I think game 3 is generally going to be in the Darklands, up in the north, and is going to heavily involve the Demons of Chaos or the 4 Chaos Gods. So Kislev can be in Game 3 and in the major Game 3. So you can play them if you have all 3 games. I think that's going to be enticing enough to get a lot of people who haven't bought all 3 games to get all 3, because Kislev is a very cool faction, and they're going to have a very hard starting position in any map that they're on, just because of where they are. And they're going to be fun and interesting campaigns to watch, because they're just right up here, right by, Norska and Kurgan and Chaos, and where the Chaos Invasion comes from. So I think that will be the final DLC, and it'll be a pre-order DLC for Game 3. If you order it, you get Kislev, and you're going to be able to play Kislev early in Mortal Empires, just like you're able to play Norska. I don't think they're going to make the same mistake they made in Mortal Empires, where they couldn't get Norska in. I think they'll have that all sorted out, and you will be able to play Kislev in Mortal Empires before Game 3 drops. And then when Game 3 drops, Kislev will be in Game 3 and in the Game 3 Mortal Empires-like map, the world map after the Game 3 map. Now, Game 3, from all I've seen, is going to be, kind of the Demons of Chaos, the 4 Chaos Gods. I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but I could see four Chaos factions fighting out to see who's going to be Chaos Undivided. And I could see them actually adding, like the Hung or Kurgan. They are different than Norska, but I think the Hung would be more interesting from what I've heard, because they're, just sort of like the Mongols, very heavy horse faction. So, hopefully we see that. Maybe we might see one or both of these factions. The big 2 that I'm really excited for in the Darklands are, of course, the Ogre Kingdoms, which I think are very interesting as a neutral faction, but very, very warlike. Mercenaries go to the highest bidders. I think they have a lot of interesting lore. And, of course, the Chaos Dwarfs. I can't wait. I hope, there's been so much speculation. It seems like they are a shoo-in to be in Game 3 in the base package with the Chaos Dwarfs. And it would be fitting, the Chaos Dwarves and the Chaos Demons and everything. It just seems to fit. And we do have some Chaos Dwarves manning Hell Cannons already, and they will just be a fantastic faction. I'm going to play the crap out of them. That's just how it's going to be. And who knows, I don't think we're going to see anything else beyond that in the base package for Game 4. Now, the Game 4 DLC, I could see definitely as possibilities, and this is where CA may have some creative license to bring in some DLCs, but potentially the Kingdom of Ind, Cathay, Nippon, they might be able to bring them into the edge of the map. I don't know. It's hard to say what they're going to do from there, because they're not really well fleshed out, but I would love to see it, because they could really have some fun with these factions. And the other faction I see as a definite potential is Araby. Again, they have some interesting armies, and potentially the Amazons down in Lustria. So that could be future DLC for the total map. I mean, I don't know what they'll call it, Mortal Empires 2, or the World, or Warhammer Total Fantasy. I don't know. Anyways, I could see those as being potential targets for DLC, because they are interesting, and they'll be fun to play. Now, of course, Ind and Cathay will be more likely, I think, because they can potentially get into the map that will be in Game 3. So we'll see. The other things I think they're going to do, and this is where we get to Gotrek and Felix as the potential for seeing them in game. I don't know what the IPs are like for Gotrek and Felix, and who owns them, and can they be put into a game. But I mean, I believe that this game has legs for future DLC after Game 3 is released on the world map. Is they can continue adding DLC probably on that last game for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe even more. There's so much meat on that bone, and they could easily do, for example, a Skaven pack where this is where they just go nuts and they give all the Skaven lords and all the rest of the Skaven units, and they call that the final Skaven DLC pack. They could do, again, maybe a dwarf pack where you get all the dwarf factions, including the ones in game 2, out in Lustria, even though they're not canon, but maybe they're more fleshed out. And in that pack, they would really be able to sell it if you could recruit Gotrek and Felix as, even like a 30-turn adventurers. You call on them and they come and join one of your armies together or something like that. I think that's when we're going to start seeing possibly a Slayer hero, where we might see a Bugman's Rangers. We might see as a hero. I mean, Joseph Bugman as a hero or a lord. We might see those types of things in a dwarf pack. And again, there's lots of people who would love to see an Empire pack where every single Empire faction is laid out and playable in one DLC, or they could, do a. It might be more interesting to release these packs more slowly, where they do a world pack where they have one dwarf faction, one Empire faction, one Skaven faction, one Lizardmen faction, one High Elf faction, etc., one Bretonnian faction added and fleshed out, and it could be called a World Enhancement Pack number 1. And then they could do World Enhancement Pack number 2, where instead of having, they can do all the same races, but just different starting positions and different lords. I mean, they could do that. They could do that for years, easily. Like, you could do your first pack with Karag Zorn for the dwarfs. You do it with Marienburg for the Empire. You can do that with, a Bretonnian faction. You can do that with a Lizardmen, a High Elf, Dark Elf. I could see it. I think that would be the more interesting, because each pack would make the world more interesting. But that's kind of how I see it coming. Really, the end of game 2, I think we got 3 packs coming. We have the Talea, Estalia, and the Border Princes, and then we're going to have some sort of Lizardmen versus Skaven, where they're going to get their Regiments of Renown, and then we'll have a pre-order Kislev pack. I think that feels pretty solid to me. I mean, it could be wrong, obviously. I don't know. I don't work at CA. Although someday I'd love to go and definitely visit them. But I really think that seems like a strong possibility, and it seems to fit everything that we have in... to match up for being in Game 2 and Mortal Empires for download, and then Kislev being in Game 3 and, Mortal Empires for the pre-order. And then, depending on how Game 3 fleshes out, I mean, this is maybe a bit of wishful thinking to think that their downloads would include things like Araby, the Amazons, in Cathay, Nippon, some way of getting them into the game, and then these big world enhancement packs where you get one of each race and they're fleshed out a little more and they continue to develop the game. I would love to see them to continue to develop this game for, a good 3 years, because, this game I think has been massively successful. I mean, it is so fun to play. And I wish, it's funny is I know there's a lot of Warhammer, historical Warhammer players that'll never pick this game up. And, I understand they're not into fantasy, but it's just such a good game, and it's been so long. I'm so happy this game is here and playable, and it's really, really fun, and it's got so much potential. But I would love to see them develop the game. Maybe they do these world enhancement packs where they have one race, one dwarf faction, one elf faction, one human faction, and then they develop the trees. They develop the abilities and gameplay, because they can kind of experiment, because what that last 3 years of post-game development will set them up for the next Warhammer Fantasy that will be maybe 5 years after that, because I cannot imagine them not continuing with this, maybe looking at continuing with Warhammer Fantasy as part of the Total War franchise. Just like, we had Medieval 1, Medieval 2, now we're going to see Medieval 3, Rome 1, Rome 2. I think we will see a continuation of that. And, they might hurry into an older version like of Warhammer Fantasy that is, very early in the world, and then go back into a newer version. Or, they might even go to other versions. I can see that happening, but I hope they continue to develop to this game for a long time afterwards, because there is so much value in that, in developing not only the game and the great stuff for a company, good monetary with good monetary consequences for the company where they can make money, but also where they can do a little bit of experimenting with gameplay and making things even more interesting and balanced. And of course, I hope they, after Game 3, I would love for them to focus on multiplayer right now, but at least after Game 3, they could dedicate a team to multiplayer and making multiplayer interesting, because there is nothing like this in any game anywhere where the multiplayer has so much potential. When it comes to this type of gameplay, there's just nothing like it. I mean, the Daoi are completely interesting and different than any other race. I mean, interesting to me. Some people find the Daoi boring, but I of course love them. But every single faction plays completely different, has completely different ideas, so it makes for potential long-term multiplayer. And I'd love to see them truly develop their multiplayer, because that's always been sort of a side thing, online multiplayer for CA. I'd like to see them develop it in this game, and then they could transfer some of the gameplay, some of the ideas to their other games, like, Medieval 3 when it comes out, and, Three Kingdoms, or these types of things, which will make them more interesting for those players if they develop the mechanism for the gameplay in Warhammer. So those are my thoughts on the future DLC, on Gotrek and Felix, and I can see them coming into the game. I would love to see Thankful, Gotrek, and Felix all come together in one world pack. I think that would be fantastic. They might save him for that and do something really interesting, but I can't imagine what. But I think we could see it, and if the IPs allow it to get into this game, they might just do it, because this has got to be a giant winner for Games Workshop, just like it's been a giant winner for CA. So anyways, those are my thoughts. Hope you found it interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts on what DLC you think is coming in Mortal Empires, if any, that's coming up, or what you would like to see, in Game 3, potential factions you'd like to see developed in Game 3. Do you like the idea of a world enhancement pack where you get one lord from each race, or something like that, or just a dwarf pack, or whatever, or what races would you like to see? I mean, maybe they'll do Albion, maybe they'll do who knows what they'll do. There's so much meat on this bone. Just hope they keep taking bites for a very long time. So hope you found that interesting, and I will see you soon.